Toyota Motor Corporation's rise to the top of the automotive world is the stuff of business legend. From its humble beginnings in post-war Japan, Toyota steadily forged a reputation for unmatched reliability and efficiency. By the 1980s, Toyota's cars, from the humble Corolla to the rugged Land Cruiser, were renowned for rarely breaking down and for delivering great value. This reputation wasn't just luck, it was engineered through a unique approach to manufacturing that revolutionized global industry. At the heart of Toyota's success was the Toyota Production System, TPS, a groundbreaking philosophy of making things. Pioneered by visionaries like Taiichi Ohno and inspired by the lean thinking of founder Kiichiro Toyoda, TPS introduced the world to concepts like just-in-time production and Kaizen, continuous improvement. The idea was simple but radical. Eliminate all waste, produce only what's needed when it's needed, and empower workers at every level to solve problems. On the factory floor, that meant parts arrived just in time to be assembled, reducing costly inventory. It meant assembly lines that could stop the moment a defect was detected, jidoka, or automation with a human touch, preventing bad parts from ever piling up. And it meant a culture where any worker could pull a cord to halt production if something was amiss. A bold inversion of the old mass production mentality. This obsessive focus on quality and efficiency paid off. Through the late 20th century, Toyota's manufacturing methods enabled higher quality at lower cost than many competitors. American and European rivals who once scoffed at Japanese autos as cheap imitations found themselves learning from Toyota's playbook. By the 1990s, business schools were teaching lean manufacturing as the gold standard, essentially codifying Toyota's approach so others could catch up. But even as competitors adopted these methods, Toyota's execution remained a step ahead. The company fostered an industrial culture where incremental improvement never stopped. Every day was an opportunity to fine-tune a process or shave a few seconds off assembly time. Over decades, these tiny improvements compounded into a massive competitive edge. Toyota's dominance wasn't just behind the factory doors, it showed up in the marketplace. The company became a global sales powerhouse, known for bulletproof cars that won over millions of loyal customers. By the early 2000s, Toyota overtook giants like Ford and General Motors in reliability surveys and began outselling them in key markets. In 2008, buoyed by the popularity of models like the Corolla, Camry, and RAV4, Toyota briefly surpassed GM to become the world's largest automaker for the first time. Despite setbacks like the 2011 tsunami and recalls, Toyota's empire proved resilient. In the years that followed, it dueled with Volkswagen for the crown, trading the top spot a few times. But as the 2020s dawned, Toyota once again pulled firmly ahead. In 2024, Toyota sold 10.8 million vehicles, remaining the world's top-selling automaker for the fifth consecutive year. No other car company could match Toyota's combination of volume and profit. The king of the auto industry seemed unbeatable. Crucially, Toyota's success also rested on an innovation in powertrains, the hybrid. In 1997, Toyota introduced the Prius, the world's first mass-market hybrid electric car. This gamble on fuel efficiency and environmental image paid off handsomely. Over the next 2 decades, Toyota sold over 15 million hybrids worldwide, and hybrid versions of models like the Camry and Highlander became bestsellers. By the mid-2000s, Toyota had a near monopoly on hybrid tech know-how, while rivals were still catching up. Hybrids gave Toyota a green halo and a loyal customer base of eco-conscious drivers, all without the range anxieties or charging needs of pure electric vehicles. Internally, Toyota believed its hybrid synergy drive was a masterstroke that would bridge the gap to any future technologies. The company doubled down, making hybrids a core strategy for cutting emissions. And indeed, even as late as 2024, gasoline-electric hybrids made up over 40% of Toyota's global sales, a record share. The hybrid strategy was yielding strong sales and helping Toyota meet regulations without fully committing to battery electrics. By all accounts, Toyota exemplified the last great era of automotive manufacturing as we knew it. It perfected the art of making gasoline engines, gearboxes, and steel bodies at massive scale, with an efficiency rivaled perhaps only by companies like Apple in their supply chain prowess. Toyota's methods were emulated from Detroit to Delhi. Its vehicles topped reliability rankings year after year, and its profits funded ever more R&D, allowing it to experiment with everything from robotics to hydrogen fuel cell cars. Toyota wasn't just an automaker, it was an institution, a symbol of Japan's post-war industrial might and a benchmark for quality. The idea that anyone could decisively topple this empire seemed far-fetched. After all, how do you beat a company that can make 10 million cars a year, reliably and profitably, and that has dominated for decades? The answer, it turns out, would not come from the old guard of automakers at all, but from a completely new direction, one that Toyota, in its pride, never fully anticipated. If Toyota was the classic empire of the automotive world, BYD arrived as an entirely different kind of challenger. BYD, which tellingly stands for Build Your Dreams, is a Chinese company that many outside of Asia hadn't even heard of a decade ago. But to understand how BYD could possibly unseat Toyota, we need to see that BYD never played by the traditional auto industry rules. This is a company born not out of gasoline and gears, but out of batteries and silicon chips. In other words, BYD is more of a technology firm that happens to make cars rather than a car company trying to add tech. And that fundamental difference became its secret weapon. BYD started in 1995 as a battery manufacturer in Shenzhen, China, one of dozens of scrappy firms making rechargeable batteries for devices like cell phones. Under the leadership of founder Wang Chuanfu, an engineer-entrepreneur, BYD became hugely successful in batteries by emphasizing research, self-reliance, and vertical integration. Vertical integration means bringing as much of the supply chain in-house as possible, instead of relying on outside suppliers. From early on, BYD made its own battery cells, then began making the battery packs, then the electronics that manage the batteries. By the 2000s, when BYD set its sights on the nascent electric vehicle market, it was already making motors and power electronics too. In 2003, BYD shocked observers by acquiring a failing state-owned car manufacturer to start building cars itself, a bold move for a battery company. But Wang Chuanfu's vision was clear. The future of automobiles would be electric, and BYD would do it all, from the battery chemistry to the final car. This strategy gave BYD a powerful advantage. Traditional automakers like Toyota depended on vast networks of suppliers for key components: engines from one division, electronics from another, batteries from a partner like Panasonic, software from yet another, and so on. BYD, instead, owned its entire supply chain for electric cars. It designed and produced its own batteries, the single most expensive part of an EV, its own electric motors, and even its own semiconductor chips for power management. In fact, BYD has a semiconductor arm that makes critical chips for its vehicle's motor controllers. It has its own battery chemical formulations and has invested in lithium mines to secure raw materials. BYD even went so far as to build its own ocean-going car carrier ships to export vehicles, ensuring it controls logistics end-to-end. This degree of vertical integration is virtually unheard of in the auto industry since the days of Henry Ford. Not even Tesla, often lauded for doing a lot in-house, matches BYD on this front. BYD's approach is reminiscent of the early 20th century, when Ford owned rubber plantations and steel mills to feed its assembly lines. BYD revived that model in a 21st century high-tech context, leveraging China's massive skilled workforce and industrial policy support to do it. The result was that BYD could move with incredible speed and at lower cost. When a company controls every piece of the puzzle, it can orchestrate them in harmony. BYD's engineers could tweak battery cell chemistry to improve a car's performance and immediately implement it, without waiting on a supplier's timetable. If a global chip shortage hit, as it did in 2020, BYD could tap its own chip production to keep its factories running, while rivals like Toyota had to idle plants for lack of semiconductors. Moreover, BYD saved the profit margins that suppliers would normally add, meaning it could build EVs more cheaply than almost anyone else and still make money. It's no coincidence that BYD's gross profit margins in recent years were around 18 to 20%, beating many legacy automakers that barely hit 10 to 15%. BYD could take those savings and undercut competitors on price or plow them back into R&D. In effect, BYD's vertical integration became a formidable moat that traditional automakers struggled to scale. One showcase of BYD's tech advantage is its in-house battery innovation, the Blade battery. Announced in 2020, the BYD Blade battery is a type of lithium iron phosphate (LFP) battery, engineered in a unique flat, blade-like shape. The design allows cells to be tightly packed for higher energy density, but more importantly, it's incredibly safe. In nail penetration tests, a way to simulate internal short circuits, the Blade battery didn't catch fire or explode, unlike conventional lithium cells. This was a breakthrough, an EV battery that's far less prone to fires, addressing a major consumer concern. BYD put these Blade batteries into its new models, touting that their cars effectively had fireproof batteries. And because they use LFP chemistry, which is cheaper and longer lasting than the nickel-cobalt chemistries used by many Western automakers, BYD cut costs further while offering buyers the peace of mind that their EV won't spontaneously combust. It was a vivid example of how BYD's end-to-end mastery, from chemistry labs to factory floor, translated into better products at lower cost. Another often overlooked facet of BYD's rise is how it thrived in the EV goldmine of China's domestic market. China pumped up demand for electric vehicles through generous subsidies, tax breaks, and a national push, part of the Made in China 2025 initiative to dominate the EV supply chain. BYD, as a domestic champion, benefited enormously from this environment. It expanded production just as Chinese EV sales exploded, from barely a few 100,000 a year in the mid-2010s to over 11 million electric cars sold in China in 2024. Unlike foreign automakers, BYD didn't have to share profits with a joint venture partner. It built its brand independently. And Chinese consumers embraced BYD's EVs, which were often significantly more affordable than foreign models. For example, BYD's small electric hatchbacks and sedans often sold for the equivalent of $15,000 to $20,000 in China, whereas an imported, or joint venture-produced, Toyota could cost much more and still burn gasoline. BYD's cars weren't always as refined as a Toyota, but they improved rapidly, and the value for money was unbeatable. Over time, BYD shed any image of being a low-end brand. It now produces vehicles across the spectrum, from the budget-friendly BYD Seagull City car to luxury electric SUVs, and even a $150,000 tech-laden super EV under its new Yangwang brand. This broad lineup, all powered by BYD's own batteries and motors, gave it scale that few could match. By the early 2020s, BYD's strategy was clearly bearing fruit. In 2022, BYD made a pivotal move. It ceased production of traditional gasoline-only cars entirely, focusing only on plug-in hybrids and pure electrics. It was a bold all-in bet on electrification, essentially saying, "Let others cling to combustion engines. We're moving on." The bet paid off faster than anyone imagined. BYD's sales of plug-in cars skyrocketed in China. In 2021, BYD sold just under 600,000 vehicles. In 2022, it more than doubled that. And by 2024, BYD's global sales reached 4.3 million vehicles, an eightfold increase from 2021, making it the world's third largest automaker by volume after Toyota and Volkswagen. To put that in perspective, BYD leapfrogged over long-established giants like Ford, Honda, Nissan, and Hyundai in a matter of years. It also became the world's largest seller of pure electric vehicles, BEVs, in 2022 to 2023, overtaking even Tesla in BEV units thanks to the strength of its domestic market. This was a stunning ascent. BYD went from underdog to industry behemoth almost overnight, on the back of its vertical integration and China's EV boom. Equally important, BYD began to expand globally with confidence. Instead of following the traditional playbook, export a few cheap cars to developing markets and slowly build up, BYD attacked key markets with its best technology. In Europe, it launched models like the BYD Tang and Atto 3 electric SUVs, often pricing them thousands of euros below comparable European models. In Southeast Asia, BYD invested in local assembly and pushed into Thailand, Indonesia, and Australia with aggressive pricing and quick delivery. BYD's cost advantage let it profitably sell EVs at price points where competitors struggled to break even. This sparked what many called an EV price war, especially in China, but increasingly in other markets, where BYD's entry forced rivals to slash prices or risk losing customers. Nowhere was this more evident than in China. Foreign brands like Volkswagen and Toyota found themselves heavily pressured by BYD's affordable EV offerings, to the point that VW's sales in China slumped and Toyota's market share eroded. By doing so much in-house, BYD could sustain lower prices, whereas companies that had to buy parts and batteries from suppliers couldn't easily match those cuts. In short, BYD's secret weapon was its fundamentally different DNA. It wasn't weighed down by an empire of gasoline technology and thousands of traditional suppliers. It was built from the ground up around electrification and integration. A former battery maker turned car maker, BYD treated cars as high-tech products first and transportation machines second. And in a world that was tilting rapidly toward electric vehicles, BYD's approach proved not just advantageous, it was transformative. As we'll see next, this difference allowed BYD to exploit weaknesses in Toyota's strategy and charge ahead at a pace the Japanese giant simply couldn't match. The stage was set for a historic upset in the global auto industry. The year 2025 showed just how BYD is slowly surpassing Toyota. Let's unpack that moment with the numbers. Through the first 9 months of 2025, BYD sold roughly 3.26 million vehicles, an 18.6% jump over its already record-breaking pace the year before. Those vehicles were almost entirely electrified, either pure EVs or plug-in hybrids, reflecting the swift shift in consumer preferences. Toyota, by contrast, managed to sell around 7.5 million vehicles in the same period, a modest growth over 2024. And as projections rolled in for Q4, it became clear that BYD would likely finish 2025 at or above 5 million vehicles sold, while Toyota was on track for around 10 million. In other words, in just a few years, BYD had gone from 7% of Toyota's volume to about 50% or more of Toyota's volume, and rising fast. The momentum was all on BYD's side. But the tipping point was about more than one company passing another in sales. It was about a broader transition in the industry. The data painted an unmistakable picture. The era of the electric vehicle had arrived, and Toyota's dominance of the old era no longer guaranteed it a top spot in the new. By 2025, fully electric cars and plug-in hybrids combined were approaching a third of all new cars sold worldwide. In China, the world's largest auto market, EVs were half of new car sales, an almost unimaginable figure just a few years prior. This wave of electrification lifted companies like BYD, Tesla, and a legion of Chinese EV makers, while leaving behind those too slow to pivot. Toyota, the master of hybrid technology, suddenly found that hybrids, which still have gasoline engines, were viewed as a stopgap at best. Consumers wanted zero-emission vehicles with the latest software and features, not yesterday's technology repackaged. In short, Toyota's once formidable wide lineup, heavy on efficient petrol cars and hybrids, started to look out of sync with the zeitgeist. One striking illustration of this shift can be seen on the streets of places far from BYD's home turf. Australia, for example, had long been a fortress for Toyota. For years, the top-selling vehicle in Australia was a Toyota, the Hilux pickup, and suburban neighborhoods were filled with Corollas and RAV4s. But by 2025, even here the landscape was changing. Electric vehicles accounted for over 11% of new car sales in Australia by late 2025, up from almost nothing a few years prior, and the charge was led not by Toyota, but by Tesla and BYD. In fact, after entering the Australian market only in 2022, BYD quickly captured about 14% of Australia's EV market by early 2024, second only to Tesla's 53%. BYD's Atto 3 electric SUV became a common sight on Australian roads, its plug-in emblem now gracing driveways that used to be occupied by Toyota's petrol SUVs. On a typical suburban street in Melbourne or Sydney, you might now see a BYD electric crossover, quietly charging at the curb where a Toyota Camry once idled. It was a small but telling sign. Even in Toyota's strongholds, consumers were embracing the new. As one Australian BYD buyer noted to Reuters, generous government EV rebates, and BYD's affordable pricing made it a no-brainer. He got an EV with a long range for about the same effective cost as a Toyota, and figured why not give it a go with the new technology. The symbolic passing of the torch also played out in regions like Southeast Asia, long dominated by Japanese automakers. In Thailand, Toyota's biggest market in ASEAN, BYD launched EV models that undercut Toyota's hybrid cars and quickly gained traction. By 2025, reports emerged that BYD had surpassed Toyota in new EV orders at the Bangkok International Motor Show, grabbing the spotlight in a market Toyota once treated as its backyard. And while Toyota still sold more vehicles overall in Thailand, the excitement and growth were clearly on BYD's side, especially as Thailand pushes for 30% of new cars to be electric by 2030. These local tipping points added up to the global story. The balance of power in auto sales was shifting. Of course, one cannot talk about 2025 without mentioning the role of Tesla as well, the pioneer of the EV revolution. Tesla continued to be a major force, particularly in luxury segments and in Western markets. But interestingly, the rise of BYD meant that Tesla was no longer the sole poster child of EV success. In fact, BYD overtook Tesla in total global EV units sold in 2024, thanks to BYD's strength in China. So by 2025, the narrative had expanded from Tesla versus legacy automakers to Chinese EVs versus legacy automakers. That broader shift was even more alarming for companies like Toyota because it wasn't a single disruptor they could try to emulate or contain. It was an entire wave of new competitors with different DNA, BYD being the largest and leading example. The geopolitical dimension became stark. After a century of the auto industry being led by the US, Europe, and Japan, the new leader was emerging from China. And unlike prior shifts, say from Ford to Toyota, which involved a handover within the established club, this was a handover to an outsider from a different economic system, one with heavy state backing, different market dynamics, and an uncanny ability to scale up manufacturing. By the end of 2025, the data solidified the story. Toyota, for all its legacy and heft, was flat-footed in the EV race. Its one fully electric model on sale globally, the Toyota bZ4X, was struggling for market share, while BYD offered over a dozen electric models covering nearly every niche. Consumers were speaking with their wallets. In China, BYD's EVs outsold Toyota's entire lineup by a wide margin, and Toyota's sales in China fell nearly 7% in 2024 amid what its own executives called heavy price competition from domestic EV makers. Globally, Toyota's total sales were essentially flat or inching up, buoyed mainly by hybrids in markets like the US. Meanwhile, BYD was doubling and tripling sales in dozens of countries as it expanded. In the drama of business history, these inflection points are often only clear in retrospect. But in 2025, it felt as if one could see the baton being passed in real time. How did it come to this? How did Toyota, the exemplar of industrial excellence, find itself losing its crown to a company that, until recently, didn't even make gasoline engines? The answers are threefold, and they serve as cautionary tales for any incumbent in any industry. Toyota's downfall can be traced to the hybrid trap, the software gap, and the price war. These were the three wounds, largely self-inflicted, that left the once invincible empire vulnerable to BYD's killer blow. Toyota's very success with hybrid vehicles turned into a strategic liability. For years, Toyota was praised, rightly, as a green pioneer for the Prius and its hybrid lineup. The company became deeply invested, financially and psychologically, in hybrid technology as the future of eco-friendly cars. Toyota's leadership, including longtime CEO Akio Toyoda, genuinely believed that hybrids, and to some extent hydrogen fuel cell cars, were the smarter path than pure battery electrics. This wasn't entirely irrational. Hybrids were profitable for Toyota, beloved by customers, and didn't suffer from range or charging issues. Toyota sold millions of them and dominated that segment. But as full EV technology improved rapidly in the 2010s and 2020s, Toyota developed a sort of blind spot. It was slow to commit to pure EVs because doing so threatened to cannibalize its hybrid business and render decades of its unique engineering advantage moot. In internal discussions, Toyota often argued that EVs were not yet practical for all use cases, and that customers in many markets still preferred hybrids. While other automakers, even hesitant ones like Volkswagen, started pouring tens of billions into EV development around 2018 to 2020, Toyota hedged its bets. It talked about a multi-pathway approach, investing in hybrids, hydrogen, and a bit of EV, rather than going all in on electric. For a while this seemed fine. As late as 2023, only approximately 10 to 15% of global car sales were pure electric, and Toyota was selling every hybrid it could make. But the exponential growth curve of EV adoption soon made Toyota's stance look antiquated. By the time Toyota really ramped up its EV efforts, in 2023, under new CEO Koji Sato, they finally announced a dedicated EV platform for 2026 and a flurry of EV models to come. They were years behind. Consider that in 2024, Toyota's entire battery electric vehicle sales were a measly 1.4% of its volume, roughly 150,000 cars, whereas BYD sold well over 1 million battery electric vehicles that year. Toyota had essentially forfeited the early EV market to Tesla, BYD, and others. The hybrid trap also led Toyota to actively lobby against EV-focused policies in some cases, further tarnishing its image among consumers who by 2025 wanted automakers to embrace electrification. Former CEO Akio Toyoda infamously said in 2022 that a silent majority in the auto industry doubted EVs and that the world shouldn't rush headlong, reflecting Toyota's internal bias toward preserving the hybrid status quo. This stance, once seen as pragmatic, increasingly looked like denial. As one analysis put it, Toyota was acting like Detroit's Big Three in the 1970s, refusing to fully acknowledge a fundamental shift in customer preference. The result? Toyota missed out on the formative years of the EV transition. When the wave hit in the mid-2020s, Toyota was caught swimming against the current, with too few EV products to offer. Its famed ability to forecast market trends, which served it so well in the era of SUVs and hybrids, failed when it came to the pace of electrification. The cost of the hybrid trap became most evident in China. As noted earlier, China's EV market exploded, and by 2024, battery EVs and plug-in hybrids together were roughly 30% of China's new car sales. But Toyota and other Japanese automakers had almost nothing to sell in those categories. They were still pushing old-school hybrids or gas cars. Chinese consumers voted with their feet. Between 2021 and 2024, sales of Japanese-branded cars in China halved, and Toyota's own market share in China plummeted from 9% to just 5.6%. It wasn't that Chinese buyers stopped liking Toyota's quality. It's that Toyota didn't have the products they wanted, affordable long-range EVs. This was a direct result of Toyota's delay in embracing BEVs. And ironically, the very thing that Toyota thought was a strength, its huge portfolio of hybrids, became a weakness. Toyota had bet on the wrong horse for the long term. The hybrid trap wasn't just a tactical error, it was a strategic blunder that left Toyota on the back foot just as the industry hit the inflection point for EVs. The second major reason for Toyota's fall is something that would have been unthinkable to the founders of the company. Toyota got out-engineered, not in mechanical craftsmanship, but in software. As cars become computers on wheels, the skill set needed to make a great car shifted. It wasn't enough in 2025 to have bulletproof engines and smooth transmissions, areas where Toyota excelled. You needed to offer a digital user experience, connectivity, and fast innovation cycles more akin to smartphones than autos. Here, Toyota, and indeed many legacy automakers, struggled mightily. The company that pioneered just-in-time manufacturing turned out to be just-in-time, or perhaps just behind time, in software development. BYD and other EV startups, unencumbered by old electronics architectures, designed their cars with advanced software systems from the ground up. Toyota's weakness in software manifested in multiple ways. Customers and reviewers started noticing that Toyota's in-car infotainment and user interfaces felt outdated compared to Tesla or Chinese EVs. Something as simple as over-the-air updates, which Tesla had normalized a decade ago, were barely present in Toyota's lineup. For instance, the Toyota BZ4X, the first global EV Toyota launched in 2022, had a very limited software feature set, Early testers noted that it didn't even have built-in route planning for charging stops. If you wanted to map a long trip with charging, you had to use a phone app rather than the car's navigation. In contrast, a BYD or Tesla would seamlessly direct you to the nearest charger when needed. This may sound like a small detail, but such digital conveniences greatly affect the ownership experience of an EV. And it pointed to a larger issue. Toyota lacked a robust software platform. Internally, Toyota realized this issue and established a digital transformation department under Akio Toyoda, but it struggled to gain influence. Reports from inside Toyota described a culture resistant to change, where software engineers felt sidelined in a hardware-dominated company. One Bloomberg report cited former Toyota employees depicting an organization bound by conformity and a paternalistic bureaucracy that valued not making waves over speed. In such an environment, fast iteration on software, which requires a fail-fast mindset and empowerment of coders, was hard to achieve. While Toyota deliberated, companies like BYD and NIO, Xpeng, etc. were hiring thousands of software engineers and developing their own operating systems for cars. BYD partnered with tech firms for features like voice assistants and integrated smartphone apps in their vehicles. Chinese EVs in particular turned the car into a gadgets ecosystem, with big displays, rich entertainment options, even selfie cameras and karaoke modes in some models, features that appealed to a younger generation of buyers. Toyota's cars, superb as their mechanical bits were, began to feel like analog devices in a digital world. The lag in software also affected vehicle performance and autonomy. Toyota, focusing on reliability, was slow to push advanced driver assistance systems beyond the basics. BYD and others started offering features like highway assist, automated parking, 360-degree AI cameras, etc., often leveraging China's tech sector advancements. Even Tesla's autopilot, not available on BYD, set a bar that made Toyota's adaptive cruise control look pedestrian. In 2023, Toyota invested in automotive software platforms. It started working on its Arene operating system. But these efforts were late and yet to bear fruit by 2025. In contrast, BYD could quickly integrate new software-driven features because they treated software as a core competency. The entire Japanese auto industry, in fact, was behind on software. Honda and Nissan suffered similarly. Toyota's caution, which normally was an asset in ensuring quality, became a liability in the software race. By the time it tried to speed up, the gap was visible. A telling comment from a tech reviewer went viral. "My Toyota feels like a Nokia phone in the age of iPhones." Ouch. For a company that once prided itself on being at the cutting edge, just in a different way, this was a wake-up call. The final factor in Toyota's downfall was the brutal price war that erupted in the global auto market, especially around EVs, a war that BYD was uniquely equipped to win. We touched on BYD's cost advantages from vertical integration in Act 2. Here is where those advantages translated into a direct assault on Toyota's empire. Essentially, BYD could make high-quality electric cars cheaper than Toyota could make comparable gasoline or hybrid cars, and BYD was willing to use price as a weapon to grab market share. This put Toyota in an awful bind: cut prices and sacrifice profit, hurting its ability to invest in EVs, or keep prices and lose customers. Neither scenario was pleasant, and in many markets both happened. Toyota had to give deep discounts on some models to stay competitive, which squeezed its margins, and it still lost sales to BYD. Nowhere was this more evident than in China's mass market segment. Consider a typical mid-size sedan in 2023 to 2025. Toyota's offering might be a Corolla or Levin hybrid, selling for, say, 150,000 yuan, roughly $21,000. BYD's offering could be the BYD Qin Plus EV, a fully electric sedan of similar size. The Qin EV's price? Around 130,000 yuan, about $18,000, after incentives, and even lower for the base model. So a Chinese consumer could buy an EV with similar space and performance as the Toyota for less money, and then enjoy dramatically lower running costs. Electricity is cheaper than gasoline per mile, and EVs need less maintenance. The total cost of ownership calculation heavily favored the BYD. Toyota's vaunted efficiency in manufacturing still couldn't match the sheer low costs that BYD achieved with its local supply chain and economies of scale in batteries. And remember, BYD was still making a profit at those prices due to its vertical integration and scale. Toyota, on the other hand, often had thinner margins on smaller cars, and certainly on hybrids once battery costs were factored in. The outcome? Toyota had to either lower prices, which it eventually did on some models in China as sales faltered, or watch its cars gather dust in showrooms. Indeed, by late 2023, Volkswagen and Toyota were caught in a price war in China, with VW publicly complaining about unprecedented price pressure as they slashed prices by 20% on EV models to compete with Chinese makes. Toyota too offered discounts on its BZ4 xEV and some hybrids. But competing on price with BYD was like trying to fight a wildfire with a garden hose. The price war wasn't confined to China. In Europe, when BYD entered markets like Norway, the UK and Germany, it often undercut incumbents. This forced some price adjustments from competitors and certainly made consumers notice. European officials, as mentioned, even launched an anti-subsidy investigation in 2023, with the European Commission president saying Chinese EVs might be underselling due to state subsidies. While protectionist measures were debated, the immediate effect was that BYD set a new baseline for EV affordability wherever it went. For Toyota, which historically pitched itself as a value brand, not luxury, but reliable and reasonably priced, facing a newcomer who could beat them on value was disorienting. So, as the EV price war heated up globally in 2024 to 2025, Toyota found itself in an uncomfortable position. It couldn't easily drop the price of a RAV4 hybrid or Camry without hurting its bottom line or devaluing the brand. But if it kept prices, a BYD or other new EV looked like a compelling alternative. In markets like Singapore, a wealthy country where Toyota had long been top seller, BYD suddenly became the best-selling brand in early 2025, overtaking Toyota. Why? Because BYD offered electric cars at a price point that undercut Toyota's hybrids once you factored in incentives and fuel savings. It was a microcosm of what was happening. BYD could always go lower on price thanks to its secret weapon, integration and Chinese scale, and Toyota was left either chasing down or ceding ground.